So I got just a few minutes before my flight, and I don't know if I'll be able to get this to you, but I wanted to share with you really quickly the story of Daniel. I'm in the airport, and my plane leaves or boards in like 5 minutes, and it's out there. Well, anyway, Daniel was a son of one of the nobles of Israel before the exile started. And the nobles weren't necessarily kings or princes, but they were leaders or rulers in the city. And so that means Daniel's father was a noble. Man, this girl's loud. This guy was a noble, and Daniel was the son of a noble. And he was young. He was a good-looking guy like me, and he. Sorry, it's really distracting here. I probably shouldn't do this. Anyway, he was living there when they got overtaken by the Babylonian Empire when a siege happened. A siege is when a military comes in and fights against a city and starts attacking it until they break their way in through the city walls or some other way and fight against the city and overtake it. And so the Babylonians had a siege over Jerusalem for 2 years. And they were attacking it. Well, finally a famine had happened, and so that famine prevented them from being able to defend themselves. Well, they were hungry, they couldn't get enough food, and so eventually the Babylonians broke their way in. They won, they beat the Israelites and the Jews that were living in Jerusalem, and they captured them. They took the men and women who had money and good jobs and were nobles and whatnot, and they took them out of there and they exiled them to Babylon, to the citadel of Susa. And so they went there, and the king of Babylon took guys like Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he made them to be servants of his. They learned the Babylonian language, and they were taught Babylonian magic arts. And so when Daniel and his 3 friends got there, they decided that they wouldn't eat the king's royal food, which might be bad for them. They wanted to eat only vegetables and drink water. And that was Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that did that. Well, those guys were like, they talked to the guy that was the commander of them. His name, I think, was Arioch. Anyway, they talked to him, and they're like, hey, can we just eat like salads and drink water instead of eating all that meat and drinking wine? And the guy's like, well, you won't look good if you do that. This is the approved diet. And they said, well, just do a test for 10 days. Nobody will care. Nobody will notice. So for 10 days, they ate what they wanted. And it turns out they were healthier looking and better looking and looked real sharp and handsome and strong. And so he says, hey, you know what? You guys can always do this. Well, they all performed so well before the king that he was really pleased with them. And Daniel was so pleased that the king kind of puts him in charge over a lot of people. Later on, Daniel would do things like interpret dreams, and he would really impressed the king so much that the king ends up putting him in charge over like all the other guys that are in charge. They were called satraps. And the satraps were in charge, but Daniel was in charge of all of them. And so the other satraps didn't like Daniel because he worshipped God and he didn't worship their idols. And so they made the king to make a law that said if anybody prays to anyone other than you, that he should be thrown into a lion's den. And the king said, hey, that sounds great. Well, they knew that was the only way they could catch Daniel, was not that he would disobey the king on one of his normal laws, but if they made a religious law, then Daniel would disobey that one. And so sure enough, Daniel did what he always did. He opened his doors of his house and he looked towards Jerusalem, and he prayed to the God of heaven, to his God. And he did that 3 times a day. And finally, the guys were like, King, you've got to do this. You've got to punish Daniel. So the king looked for a way to do it, but he couldn't, so he had to throw Daniel in the lion's den. But he ends up throwing him into the lion's den and seals it shut, and the king couldn't sleep all night. Daniel did just fine. Daniel was doing okay because he trusted God. And he said, King, you do what you've got to do. If you got to throw me in there, that's fine. God can save me, just like he saved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fiery furnace in Babylon. Because this was I skipped forward ahead, this is in the Persian kingdom where Darius was the king. And so, sure enough, he's locked in there all night. And the lions, God sent his angel to shut the mouth of the lions, and they didn't eat Daniel. So the king brought him out in the morning. He was so thankful that he praised the God of heaven, the Israelite God. And then he made a decree that they had to throw in the men and their families who had set Daniel up. And the lions ate them before they even hit the ground. And so Daniel was showing a good witness for who God is. I think the lesson for that story is that no matter what we're doing, we can just serve God. We don't have to bow down to the idols that everybody else worships, and we can continue showing other people that God is the only God that exists, and that all other things are just idols and they're powerless. And so we keep worshiping God no matter what everybody else does.